that think it's okay to poison Philadelphians. Opioid manufacturers, distributors, and dispensers systematically poison Philadelphians for years. That poisoning has caused the deaths of countless people. When I get up in the morning and I have breakfast, one Philadelphian will die from opioid overdose. Same thing will happen at lunch, and same thing will happen at dinner. We will have 1,000 Philadelphians die this year from opioid overdose, and the finger points directly at the corporations that have profited from their cheating, their lies, and their violations of the law to make that money. If you're going to poison Philadelphians, you're going to pay. That is how we are in Philly. If you're going to poison Philadelphians, you better be ready to pay. I am here to announce that this morning at about 9 o'clock, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office began a lawsuit against the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office to make it clear that the DA's lawsuit is not going away. We are not going to allow it to be signed away by the Attorney General. We are not going to allow it to disappear. I first want to acknowledge some people who are here, and then I'll get into specifics and we'll take any questions. You should know that in February, 2.5 years ago, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office filed its own lawsuit against opioid manufacturers. We have been litigating that lawsuit vigorously for a long time. The city also filed its own lawsuit, which it has litigated vigorously with many of the same attorneys for almost those 3 years. I'm going to introduce you to the attorneys who have done that, but I want you to know the Attorney General never filed a lawsuit against these defendants. This so-called settlement is a settlement of a lawsuit that was never filed, that was never litigated against these defendants, and yet somehow we find ourselves in a posture where there's a sweeping settlement we know very little about. We have with us today John Weston of Sachs Weston LLC, Stephen Scheller of Scheller PC, Jerry Desiderato of Dilworth Paxson, Greg Heller of McLaughlin Lorcella, and we also have here in spirit Jennifer Connolly of Barron and Budd, who's in D.C., because yes, this is a national effort, and it's a serious effort to hold those who profited from opioids accountable. We also have with us today a few people who will be speaking. We have Sarah Laurel and Mac Alisad of Savage Sisters. Did I mispronounce your name? Oh, okay. Mac Alisad of Savage Sisters. We have Qasim Rashad, who's the Emir at the United Muslims Masjid of South Philadelphia. They will all be speaking, and I hope to see Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez, who is here. Thank you for being here, Councilmember, who perhaps more than any other member of council has worked long and hard to try to lift up the situation that is addressed in Kensington, and we appreciate her being here. The message that we have here is quite straightforward. It is that the settlement that the Attorney General has been speaking about is too low, meaning it's not enough money. The money comes too slow, meaning it comes over almost 20 years, 18 years before the payments are supposed to be over, and that money may not even show. That money may not even show because over 18 years these companies have the ability to go bankrupt, because there are provisions in this deal that indicate that if these companies are not as profitable as they want to be, they don't have to pay for that year. And it may not show, perhaps most troubling, it may not show because this money doesn't come directly to Philadelphia. This money goes through the hands of state officials and state agencies that have made it clear that they don't want to fund Philadelphia the way they fund other parts of this state. Just look at Philadelphia's public schools if you have any question of what I'm talking about. So take that situation and look at what the mayor has done. The mayor filed a lawsuit on behalf of this city, the people who live here, against these manufacturers. All the money from that lawsuit goes right here. The DA's office filed a lawsuit, a separate lawsuit, against these opioid manufacturers under a special law to protect consumers. All of that money goes right here to Philly. It doesn't go through the hands of people who would like to recount the last election. If you understand what I'm saying, they seem to have a funny sense of math. It comes straight here, and it comes straight here for the real needs that we have in Philadelphia. At this time, I would like to call forward Sarah Laurel and Mac Al-Assad of Savage Sisters. Savage Sisters is an organization in and around Kensington that does important work with people who are suffering from addiction. It is an organization that my office appreciates and respects, and therefore when they applied for a grant from our office, we gave them a grant because we think the work that they're doing is very important. After we hear from them, we will also hear from Qasim Rashad, and then I will return to address some other specific points and to introduce Councilmember Maria Quinones-Sanchez, who will have some comments. Savage Sisters.
My name is Sarah Laurel. I'm here on behalf of Savage Sisters nonprofit. Our nonprofit is on the front lines. Our nonprofit is on the front lines every day, working throughout this opioid crisis with not only the residential community members, those that are homeless and displaced, and our efforts are to promote education and harm reduction and housing. Those efforts need support financially, and I can only share with you that my personal experience, I was a business professional who was inappropriately prescribed an opioid, which led to a harrowing and haunting substance use problem for years in the city of Philadelphia. And now, thank you.
Good afternoon. With God's name, the most gracious, the most merciful. My name is Qasim Rashad. I am the Emir of the United Muslim Masjid in South Philadelphia, probably less than a mile from here. And we just want to say how much we admire the District Attorney's Office for all the work that they've done. We also know and recognize that there's no illusion that the impact of the opioid crises on the city of Philadelphia transcends racial lines, economic standing, religious and faith. All people have been impacted by this pandemic. And we also know that over 30% of the people that have been, or Black Americans or African Americans in Philadelphia, the rise is up for us for this pandemic. We've been impacted, and the use of that is up by about 30%. The Public Religion Research Institute also did a very extensive demographic on what's going on in religion in this country. And in the country, it's about 1% of the population is Muslim, but in Philadelphia, it's over 4%. We are the most densely populated Muslim city in America. And we are also impacted by this pandemic of opioid addiction. We also know that the confluence of the violence, gun violence in the city of Philadelphia and the opioid addiction in Philadelphia are just like milk and cookies. They're running hand in hand together. And so what the District Attorney's Office fight has been not to persecute those who are using the drugs and those who are necessarily involved in the violence, but more or less the manufacturers of the guns and the drugs that permeate our city. And for that, we stand in unison with the District Attorney's Office, with the Mayor of Philadelphia, in combating this scourge that is terrible and is impacting our city and taking all of our kids out, all of our residents out, and we are all negatively impacted by this pandemic and this confluence of gun violence and opioid addiction. Thank you very much.
So a couple of details before I introduce Councilmember Maria Quinones-Sanchez, who has worked tirelessly to try to improve the situation on the ground in Kensington that is so desperately affected by addiction to opioids. This settlement is with the big three distributors, which are McKesson, Cardinal, and AmerisourceBergen, and also with Johnson & Johnson, meaning the Attorney General's settlement. The CEO of AmerisourceBergen last year made $14.7 million. That is more money than this lawsuit would bring into Philadelphia in its first year. The minute news of this settlement hit these companies, their stock went up because the people who invested in them thought this was good times for opioid manufacturers. What does that tell you about this settlement? Let me tell you more specifically what this really boils down to. When you go through 310 pages of this agreement that was only given to us last night after this press conference, after we've been in litigation for 2.5 years, what you find out is that in a best case scenario, over a period of 18 years, Philly's only going to see somewhere between $5 million and $8 million. There are individual lawsuits on behalf of individuals where just one of these companies has agreed to a $100 million settlement. We had 1,000 people die of opioids last year. Every time you took a meal, one of them died. And what they would like to give us is $5 to $8 million in a best case scenario for 1,000 lives, when in other cases they're willing to give $100 million for one life. I gotta be missing something here, but that doesn't sound very good. This deal is not secured, meaning we need to count on these companies to keep paying over 18 years. Do you remember Hewlett-Packard? Do you remember Fannie Mae? Do you remember Compaq? You remember J.C. Penney? You probably remember they aren't doing so well. They were doing so well a while ago, but that's what happens over 18 years. We have no reason to believe these companies are going to make it 18 years. We have no reason to think they won't go bankrupt, and the deal itself allows them not to pay if they are not profitable enough that particular year. Guess who's keeping their books? Guess who's keeping their books? Do you think that maybe incentivizes them to understate how much money they're making while their CEO makes $14.7 million a year? It's very, very troubling. If the city does not get paid in any given year, or if the defendants fail to do what they're supposed to do in terms of changing the practices, under this agreement, the city does not even have a right to sue them. Under this agreement, all those rights sit with the Attorney General's office, an office that did not communicate with our attorneys for 2.5 years. These attorneys tried 40, 50 times to work with the AG's office, to communicate. We were the ones litigating. We were the ones filed a lawsuit. We were the ones getting at the facts. The AG's office chose to completely disconnect from all of these efforts and wrote an agreement that basically says, yeah, but if somebody violates the agreement, we'll handle it. You'll handle it. That should bother you, and they won't even handle it in court. They're going to handle it with an arbitrator. Who picks the arbitrators? For those of you who have some doubts about arbitration, perhaps you've heard of our annual FOP contract or our triannual FOP contract. Arbitrators don't always get it right. The court system is what it is. You should also know that there are at least 15 other states where, unlike Pennsylvania, which has seen no communication between these attorneys for the city and the attorneys for the DA's office, in 15 other states, the attorney generals were at least communicating directly and frequently with municipalities that filed their own lawsuits, and there are a bunch in Pennsylvania, and with DA's offices who filed their own lawsuits. So there has been no transparency. There has been no collaboration. There has been no working together by an attorney general who seems to get along better with opioid manufacturers and with Republican attorneys general from around the country than he gets along with lawyers doing the work to pursue this litigation. When we look at other jurisdictions where these cases have gone to trial, and a few of them have gone to trial, what we see is that those places do better. There are 2 counties in Ohio that were desperately affected by opioids. They were Summit County and Cuyahoga County. What happened there? Well, they have a similar population, but there, at the courthouse steps, when the trial was going or about to go, they settled for $260 million. Now, I just told you, 5 to 8 million in a best case scenario for 18 years. Well, 5 million times 18 years is $90 million. 8 million times 18 years, $144 million. Cuyahoga got 266. And let's understand something. Cuyahoga and Summit got 266 million up front right now. Guaranteed. It can't go down some trap door. That is bankruptcy. Can't go down some trap door. We didn't make enough money this year according to our accountant. Can't go sit down some trap door where I didn't pay anything to you this year, but an arbitrator I picked or helped to pick is going to settle that. And then there is the other point, which is that 260 million right now over 18 years becomes worth twice, 3 times that. It becomes worth close to $1 billion. We're supposed to take what here in Philadelphia County? We're supposed to take 5 to 8 million a year. This is unacceptable. This is just unacceptable. It is insufficient for the harm that these companies have inflicted on the city. We need resources, and I don't know anyone who is more articulate on what we need to do with those resources and how much we need those resources than Councilmember Maria Quinones-Sanchez, and I'm proud to call her forward.
Thank you, DA Krasner. Thank you to our advocates and everyone who has experienced the crisis that is opioid addiction. As was said, it is like milk and cookies. It has contributed significantly to gun violence. And the numbers speak for themselves. We're in line to lose 1,200 people in Kensington. But opioid addiction is a citywide problem. The epicenter is Kensington, but it has impacted everybody's lives. This is not about numbers. The people who are subjected to this addiction caused by greedy pharmaceutical, some located here in Pennsylvania, will cause them a lifetime journey of recovery, one that will take resources for us to provide them with the services they need so that they can have their dignified life back. That is priceless. This is not just numbers, because the numbers don't add up, but this is about people's lives. So while I appreciate the process and the work of the attorney generals in doing this, this will not work for Philadelphia. This is unacceptable for Philadelphia. So I thank the mayor for saying, no, this is unacceptable. I thank the DA for saying, no, this is unacceptable. And on behalf of the residents of Philadelphia and the epicenter of opioid crisis, I say, no, this is unacceptable. There is a $130 million investment in Kensington and in the city on opioid addiction every year, and it's not enough. So it can't be 5, it can't be 8. And there has to be a commitment to long-term support and recovery for the people in addiction and their families who forever will have their lives changed as they support their loved ones through that recovery. It is not enough, and we will not accept anything but what it takes to repair the damage that they cause to our community and our family members. Thank you.
All right, I just have a couple final words, and then if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer it. This is the work. These attorneys are being shy. They're not standing up here, but this is the work. That's what it looks like. It looks like work. Hundreds of pages of serious effort to hold giant, almost unaccountable companies accountable. And the caption on this one is, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania by and through the Philadelphia District Attorney versus the Office of the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We are Philly. We have to protect Philly. We have to stand up for Philly. We are not going to accept a settlement that is a sellout. And from what I see in the 310 pages that were dropped on us at 7 o'clock last night, from what I see, this is a sellout. The money is too low, the payments are too slow, and the money may never show. I want to thank the mayor for saying he's going to stand up and fight. So am I. I have been in the courtroom for 33 years. I used to be in a courtroom 4 to 5 days a week. This is a courthouse. Philadelphia is going to go into this courthouse, and we're going to find out from a Philadelphia judge and a Philadelphia jury what these manufacturers, distributors, dispensers should pay. And that is a number that's going to give us the resources that we need to protect Philadelphians. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
What sort of number are you actually seeking? You're saying, what they give you is good, but what are you expecting?
We are expecting a number that looks frankly enormous compared to this number. I am aware of cases involving individuals, a single person, that have settled recently with one of these manufacturers for almost $100 million. You want to do some math? You got 1,000 people dying a year from opioids. If we priced their value in that way, and I hate to price any human life in any way, what's 1,000 times 100 million? That's $100 billion for 1 year's worth of deaths that have been caused by these companies. And what are we being offered? 5 to 8 million? This is inadequate. I don't know exactly what number a Philadelphia jury would say, but I trust Philadelphia juries. I tried a lot of Philadelphia juries. I don't know exactly what number a judge would put on penalties for what these manufacturers did to consumers. But I trust those judges who were elected by Philadelphians, just as I was elected by Philadelphians, just as the mayor was elected by Philadelphians. Elections count. And I got a real problem when other people want to come into Philly and take away our rights to conduct lawsuits in the way we think they should be done to protect our people. I got a real problem with that. Philly's going to protect Philly. Gritty is our mascot for a good reason. We're going to take them on.
What's the difference between today's suit and the one previously filed by your office?
So the lawsuit that we filed previously was a lawsuit under the Consumer Protection Act. It has now been litigated for about 2.5 years, and it is an effort to hold these companies accountable. The lawsuit that is filed today is a lawsuit to get the appellate courts in Pennsylvania to make it clear that no, the Attorney General cannot take away our lawsuit, has no right to take away our lawsuit. And there are suggestions in these documents that that's exactly what the Attorney General intends to do.
The idea is to resolve the settlement, or what's the end game?
I'm sorry?
What's the end game? Is it to resolve the settlement through the AG's office, or kind of what
No,
what outcome are you hoping for?
the end game is that the mayor is able to take his case to trial, and he's able to put it in front of a Philadelphia jury and let a Philadelphia jury do justice. The end game is that we're able to take our case to a Philadelphia judge and let that Philadelphia judge do justice under the Consumer Protection Act, that we shouldn't be cut off at the legs by a bunch of people who sat in a room, never filed a lawsuit, contrary to the claim of taking on these big companies, seem to have had a long and friendly conversation that involved no litigation, and then said, we got it all settled and you all have to quit. That's really the end game. We trust Philadelphia juries. We trust Philadelphia judges. We want justice. And we don't see that in this settlement of a lawsuit that was never filed. What we see here, what I see here, honestly, looks more like a sellout.
What impact does this settlement have on the city case and your case? Anything specific? Does it still allow you to try it?
Well, it's the short answer is yes. The city can still try its case. Yes, the DA's office can still try its case. We just need an appeals court to make that clear, because there seems to be an effort on the part of this settlement to somehow put attorneys general in a position where they can yank the rug out of every district attorney in the state who filed one of these cases. You should know there are a lot of cities that filed their own lawsuits against opioid manufacturers. There are a lot of DAs in this state who filed their own lawsuits, and DAs from every end of the political spectrum who filed their own lawsuits. It is very important that the sovereignty of those counties' elected officials is preserved and that they're able to make judgments on behalf of the people who voted them in, instead of having a situation where nothing they do really matters anymore because, you know, an attorney general said so.
I guess does the low settlement, will that impact, possibly impact your lawsuits?
We intend to fight vigorously in our lawsuit and fight for every dollar we can get. We all know that dollars are not enough when it comes to human life, but we intend to fight for every dollar we can get. We're not going to be tobaccoed. For those of you who don't remember, it's been a while, but what happened with the tobacco litigation is cities got screwed. States did fine. States took the money, they plugged holes in their budgets, they left the cities to hang, and the money that was supposed to go for treatment to abate the problems that had been caused and was supposed to go for prevention never made it there. We're not getting tobaccoed. You know, we're not getting tobaccoed. You don't come to Philly and poison our people and get to take our wallet too. Are there any other questions for anyone here? All right, thank you very much.